instances in which the court does not have the authority to enforce compensation, but is able to threaten a litigant with the curse of vi shepara. As usual, there are instances in which the transaction is not finalized even after the buyer paid the full purchase price. In such cases, the buyer or seller can revoke the transaction, even if this causes a significant loss to either party. While the court does not have the authority to enforce the original transaction, it can express its disappointment by issuing the following admonition. The one who exacted retribution from the generation of the flood and the generation of the dispersal will exact retribution from anyone who does not stand by his word. And that's from Bava Kamma. There is a dispute between Abaye and Rava in Bava Kamma 48b. If this is just a judicial admonition or is an actual curse and an evocation of divine punishment for the one who does not stand by his word. It is noteworthy that the curse of mi shepara makes specific mention of both generation of the flood and generation of the dispersal. Though people in both eras committed sins much graver than reneging on their transactional commitments. And lastly, the Torah in Torah Tamima in Bereshis chapter 6 verse 13 explains that the parallels between these generations and someone who does not keep his promise is that all of them committed wrongful acts that could not be adjudicated or punished by a court of law.
Okay. All right, Arthur, I keep getting the fabric of your clothing for some reason instead of you. I don't know. Yeah, but I don't know what you're doing. I honestly don't know what you're doing. All right. First thing is, Arthur, I'd like to know where's Arthur gone?
Where is he exactly? Where is he gone?
I don't know. It's like, where's Waldo? Guys, come on. We need to start. Arthur?
We got a connection problem.
Arthur? He's frozen.
Should I phone him? His family's there. He's probably listening.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. No problem. All right. I was going to ask Arthur Grilling with a question, but he was saved by his family. Okay. So I'm going to ask Kevin and Gavin a question. What did we do yesterday? Can you tell me the principles, either of you, any of them?
I had a disastrous day. I really don't remember anything at this stage.
Okay.
Kevin, do you remember anything? You get me
Hold
started, mate.
on a sec. Yeah. About an eye. Okay, but it was literally if someone's eye gets taken out by someone, should he lose his eye, the perpetrator? Generally speaking, it's not done. They had to have the discussion because it's a literal discussion, so they had to have, but generally speaking, it's monetary compensation. But maybe some opinion says an eye can be taken from someone that took someone's eye out.
Good.
Or
All right.
limb. Okay.
All right. I'm going to go out on a limb and just go through a little bit of Chazorah, but I'm going to have a conversation about it because I don't actually need to read it piece by piece. So, Rabbi Dostai Ben Yehuda was talking about this eye for an eye and said, is it literal or figurative? And then this whole comment came, well, what happens if the victim and the assailant have different sizes of eyes or different colors of eyes, etc.? How do you say that it's equal to each other? So, for example, if the victim had a big eye, beautiful blue eyes or whatever, and the assailant had very funny-looking, squinty eyes, if his eye is taken out, that doesn't provide equal compensation, and the term is equal for the damage he caused. And then the Gemara is saying, listen, it doesn't make 100% sense. When we talk about sight, let's talk about quality of sight. maybe the assailant has got poor eyesight and the victim has got great eyesight. So if you take the assailant's one eye out for an eye, the assailant is only losing poor eyesight to nothing, whereas the victim has gone from great eyesight to nothing. So it's not equal compensation. So it's saying on that basis, not actually the size of an eye, it's talking about the strength of an eye, the quality of vision, that maybe it's not equal. So how can you take an eye for an eye? And we learn from this that maybe it's better to take monetary payment because you can work out a proper formula for monetary payment. Does that make sense? So then,
I remember yesterday we covered the fact that you shouldn't mix and match, like either like monetary one time and
exactly. Well remembered.
Rather just go monetary rather.
Okay, no, we didn't say let's go monetary rather. What we said is exactly what Gavin said in Leviticus chapter 24, verse 22, which says, one law shall be for you in Vayikra. So what that means is that you cannot have a system where you either take out an eye in some cases, an eye for an eye, a limb for a limb, and in other cases make monetary compensation. You have to have uniformity in terms of the law. But Gavin, that's going to come a little bit later. At the moment, the principle is, in this case, do we set a standard that we're swapping limb for limb, or are we doing financial compensation for a limb damaged or injured or permanently removed? So therefore, we're saying, look, what is the accuracy? Is it better to do monetary compensation, or do we go literally an organ for an organ? And this example of an eye being of unequal size physically or unequal color, where one is seen as a more beautiful eye than another in terms of attractiveness or vision-wise, one eye has got perfect vision and the other one is slightly myopic, or there's stigmatitis, a stigma or something like that. In that case, it's not equivalent to take out eye for an eye, because there's clearly different qualities of eyes. So the first thing of it is so that's what the Gemara is. So it's saying maybe on that basis we should actually just work out monetary instead of an eye for an eye, because it's a lot more equal. Okay, and then the Gemara says that maybe there should be this law that in some cases you work out monetary payment when it's unequal, Kevin, and when it's equal, you actually swap an organ for an organ or a limb for a limb. Does that make sense? That you have two rule books. And that's where this verse comes in Leviticus chapter 24, verse 22, Kevin, that says, there's one law shall be for you all. Meaning you can't in some cases have monetary compensation and others reciprocal payment of a limb for a limb. So that's one of the issues there. So how do we know which one takes precedence? So the other problem is, what's this argument of unequal quality of eye or unequal size? And the argument that Gemara uses is the fact that if there are two men and one kills the other man, we don't make this statement. Okay? Why? Because we said yesterday the one guy's a drug addict and a good-for-nothing thief, and the other person is employing thousands of people doing good community work. They had a road rage incident, and the guy was braking in his car to get money for drugs. So he slapped him, he hit his head on the concrete, and he died. So society would say, well, maybe you shouldn't kill this pillar of society because he's employing thousands of people, and where are they going to get a job for? And this guy was just a no good for nothing drug addict. But the Torah doesn't say that. The Torah says if you take a soul from someone, your soul shall be taken. And we don't accept monetary compensation or a ransom, as the Torah calls it. We take the soul of a murderer. So in the same way, just like the assailant took sight from his victim, so too maybe the merciful one should take sight from the assailant. In other words, let the court take out an organ for an organ, because we don't measure in terms of qualitative difference in regards to the death penalty. So why should we in the case of injury. Make sense so far, guys? Please, so we can go on.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. So then the next concept is, hang on a second. What if you're dealing here with a Stevie Wonder, and he's blind, and he accidentally knocks somebody with his cane because he doesn't see them and blinds them? Well, you can't take out an eye for an eye because he doesn't have any. So what do you do in that case? So in that case, to swap an organ for an organ, there's nothing to take. So in that case, it might make sense and prove that it's actually monetary compensation. Because before we couldn't prove conclusively it was a monetary compensation. Because we said if it was unequal, the eye of the assailant and victim, the monetary compensation is the only way to equalize the formula. But since we learned from the case of a murderer, it's a soul for a soul. Here we learn it's an eye for an eye. They don't have to be of equal stature. Just like two people that are involved in an altercation might not be equal in net contribution and worth. So we're saying then monetary compensation isn't needed there to work it out according to an equated formula of mismatch. All you have to do is swap an eye for an eye. So that's not conclusive proof, the first one, that you require monetary compensation. And yet, we can't have this rule, as Gavin noted, that we have monetary compensation in one case and as a reciprocal payment of a limb in another. We need to find an overall system. Either it's limb for limb, organ for organ, or it's monetary compensation, but not both. So this next case is Stevie Wonder's blind. Takes his cane out to feel something and takes somebody's eye out. They can't take Stevie Wonder's eye out. Why? He's blind. What are you going to take from him? So the Gemara is suggesting then maybe you take monetary compensation since you can't take his eye. And the problem is, again, we learn this law from capital punishment from 78a in Sanhedrin. With this regard, yes, Kev?
I wonder what you can get, what you'll be able to claim from Stevie Wonder.
And that's very funny. That's cute.
Sam,
Yeah?
can you hear me?
Yes, Putty?
Wouldn't it be like with the Evet, for example? If Evet loses his tooth, okay, he's set free, and he comes due, and then when he loses his eye, the guy gives him monetary compensation. Doesn't say take my eye.
Okay, Arthur's got a good point. Arthur's saying we know from history that that we take monetary compensation. Very, very good. I was waiting for somebody to bring up that salient point. Arthur's the only one that Rabbi Cohen is paying off, mate. So you're the only one that says, but it's obvious. We've learned up until now there's only monetary compensation. What's this new nonsense about an organ for an organ? So clearly we know ever since Moshe Rabbeinu, Arthur, there's never been a case in the Sanhedrin or in the Beis Din where they've taken out an eye for an eye. Throughout history, there's never been a case like that in the Oral Torah's application, ever. So we're saying, why learn it? Because we want to know the basis on how we know that. What sort of logical or scriptural preface actually creates such a concept? So we want to know the mechanisms now as to how we took something like this for granted. Make sense?
Yeah.
So the next thing is it's saying, well, you can't take out Stevie Wonder's eye. So maybe since in rare cases where the person's missing a limb, but he takes that exact limb from somebody else, and we can't extract a measure for measure payment, in order to do it midah k'neged midah, we take money from him. But in all other cases, we can take an organ for an organ or a limb for a limb. So the Gemara says that's a problem. What's the problem? There shall be one rule for all. Again, that verse in Leviticus, there shall be one rule for you, which means you can't have a standard of monetary and organ reciprocal payments. You get what I'm saying? You're going to have to choose one or the other. Can't be cases. And it's saying, look at the case of a treifa with Sanhedrin. With the treifa, that's a guy with one of the 24 terminal illnesses. And those cases where there's one of those 24 illnesses, he's dead man walking. So what does that mean? It's in Chulin 42a. Is that the oak's got cancer, he's got AIDS, but not AIDS like fichs today, where the oak lives for 16 years. I'm saying in the old days, where he looked like a skeleton within a few months and his body was ravished. I'm saying before the antiretrovirals, you talk about like a guy on death row that's technically legally dead. As we said yesterday, Susan Sarandon, Sean Penn, that movie Dead Man Walking. It's exactly it. Guy's legally dead. So if he kills somebody while he's got a short time to live, in other words, he's terminal, we can't give him the death penalty because he's dead man walking. It uses the case actually of Adam Zomamim and saying that the Adam Zomamim get the reciprocal punishment of they were meant to do to their victim. And since they were meant to put the victim to death, and they couldn't because the victim's going to die anyway, they can't be Adam Zomamim. Therefore, if Adam Zomamim can't have it turned on him, then you can't have Zomamim at all. You can't have witnesses at all, and therefore the case doesn't exist. So therefore, in the case of a treifa, if he killed somebody, we let him go in the sense that Shemaima hold him responsible, but we don't give him the death penalty because it's not possible to give him the death penalty since he's terminal. So in that case, the Gemara is saying what we do is we have a rule of this either chayiv or patur. You're either guilty or you're not guilty. If you're convicted, you're convicted. If you're not, you're not. You don't have a case where a treifa then makes monetary payment in compensation since he can't give his life. So to here it says, when you go measure for measure, exchanging limb for limb, you can't have in certain cases where it's Stevie Wonder taking out somebody's eye, or that person, the assailant is missing the limb that he took from the victim, that in that case is monetary compensation, but in all other cases it's limb for limb. Because of Leviticus chapter 24, verse 22, there shall be one rule. So we're saying that rule is applied in a death penalty case in the 78th daf of Sanhedrin. So therefore, the same thing as here is, listen, in a case where you can take the oak's eye, take his eye. If he doesn't have an eye, you can't. So there's not a double standard of when it's unequal because you can't get compensation, then you do monetary. So the Gemara says, just like it's that case of treifa where he doesn't get the death penalty, we don't make him pay monetary compensation. Here too, we don't make him pay monetary compensation if he can't lose a limb for a limb. So then it's saying, well, then why don't we overall make monetary compensation? So we're saying the same thing in the death penalty. There's no monetary compensation in exceptional cases. So this is not a proof again that eye for an eye means a monetary payment. It's inconclusive. You get what I'm saying, guys? So far.
Yeah.
Fine. Then there was a sage of Rav Yishmael's academy, and he taught a brisa, so shall be given upon him, and there's no giving except of money. From here we see that the assailant gives money as payment for damage. So it's part of the brisa. So it's saying this term of giving. What do you mean giving exactly? It's in Leviticus chapter 24, verse 20, not 22. 22 is talking about one law. Verse 20 is talking about this fact that when one shall give a wound on a person, it's in reference, is that in reference to money? Because it's implying that maybe the word giving is you can give money. So the Gemara is saying no. It doesn't mean that it's obviously in reference to money. Because why? Because it means you can give a guy a clap as well. It doesn't have to be a kind thing you're giving him. So therefore, since you can give him a clap, it's no indication that it's money. So in other words, if the assailant takes the victim's leg, he can give him monetary compensation. It could mean that, but it could also mean that the court gives him a clap and takes out and breaks his leg. So it's no indication that it means necessarily money. And then the Gemara says, hang on a second. Rav Yishmael's academy expounded that there's a superfluous verse. And why? Because it said in the preceding verse, and if a man gives a wound on his fellow, as he did shall be done with him. So in other words, that is implying that if a wound he gave on his fellow, the same shall be done to him, meaning he should also be given a wound. So this word done seems to imply that it's actual organ for organ. And when it has the word giving, it has the word meaning a payment. So it's saying, hang on a second, it could be either way. So how do we know it's giving of money? because it uses the extraneous term, so shall be given upon him, because it's saying, listen, it's repeating the verse over and over again. And if you give a wound on his fellow as he shall do unto him, then there's the verse 20 to repeat, so shall be given unto him. So why does it say that twice? The reason is if the word is done to him, if he's done an injury to his victim, the assailant gets the injury done to him. But it has a second thing, given to him, meaning it's coming to repeat the verse to show you that it's actually money by the term give and a repetition of it. So since the Torah needs right, so shall be given upon him to teach that payment damage is monetary, it wrote also when he shall give a wound on a person as its preface. Okay, so that's where we're up to. So it's saying so far that last one seems a little bit more conclusive, but not totally. That it seems to indicate money, but it's not foolproof either. Because otherwise it would be case closed. It's not. So the Gemara presents another valid proof that the penalty for damage is money. So it's trying another trick. A sage of Rav Klia's academy taught in the Brisa, the verse states that Zomamim, witnesses, well, we mean conspiring witnesses, guys, and that's, as you know, it's not a witness that makes a mistake. It's a witness that's trying to conspire to have an innocent victim get punished for that crime. He must pay a hand for a hand. In other words, in Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 21, we've got this thing of what happens, Kevin, to Adim Zomamim.
Adim Zomamim, if they are found to be false accusers, they get the penalty gets levied against them for what they falsely accused someone of.
Exactly, that's exactly it. So it's saying that whatever they conspire to do against the defendant in the witness box, when they're caught to be conspiring and lying witnesses, in that particular case, what they intended to do to this defendant is done to them. So if witnesses testified that Reuven cut off Shimon's hand and they were subsequently contradicted through Hazama, Hazama is when a second set of witnesses said the first set of witnesses couldn't have been there because they were with them somewhere else, they make a monetary payment. And that we know that. Okay, so that's one of the proofs. So we're saying, because it uses the term, if a hand is a hand for a hand, meaning if you take the hand from the assailant, meaning you say that the assailant chopped off somebody's hand and you were found lying, do they chop off your hand as a false witness? It says no. A hand for a hand. What is exchanged in hands? Guys, between hands. Money. Money is exchanged in hands. So it says this implies that when someone actually injures another person, is liable to monetary payment. But does that make sense? Because it says hand in hand, yad miyad. So the thing of it is, yeah.
And there's a difference between Azumamin and what's the other one you said?
Adam Zomamim is a conspiring witness.
And the other one is a contradictory witness.
Yes, that's different because...
Two different types.
Correct. Arthur's 100% correct. Because a contradictory witness can say, listen, the one guy said, I saw him kill the other person. He said, no, he looked dead, but I just saw him hitting him, but I don't think he's dead. Or you saying the accident was corner long and Northfield Avenue, and I'm saying it was only long, it hadn't got to Northfield Avenue. So that's not conclusive, but it doesn't look like they're conspiring, because part of contradictory witnesses is agreeing on certain points. That's how you know that it took place. It's on the details that they're contradicting each other, but not about the event happening, otherwise they'd never been caught. So when a case clearly is people are mistaken, they're not given a reciprocal payment because nobody's ever going to testify in court that way, guys. No one. It's only when they accused. They put the defendant and accused him of something, and then they were found not to even be in the place where they having said that they witnessed the event. So if Shimon said he saw Reuven beat somebody half to death in Santon, but Levi turns around and said he was with me in Durban, clearly that's a conspiring witness. So it has to be where the person couldn't have been at that place because they were seen somewhere else by the public. Okay, so what we're saying is, listen, if this occurs, we don't chop off a hand for a hand. What's given between, it uses the word, and this is a hint, yad b'yad, hand to hand. What it means is it's an inference about money. You transfer money hand to hand. So that proves it's not maybe and a hand for a hand. So the Gemara objects because it says something simple. Well, what do you do with this statement, a foot for a foot? Now you've got a problem, guys, because you don't exchange money by feet. What happens then? Just killed that argument. You get what I'm saying?
It wasn't great to incorporate it.
Yeah.
And you can grab the notes with your toes, the banknotes.
Yeah, but Kevin, that's generally not the way
I know
we
this
transfer
sounds
money unless you've got hands amputated. Generally, nobody accepts money feet by feet. It's hand by hand. So if it's abnormal practice, we learn this in the Mishnah Brura in the Halacha, that if there's a certain way to eat a food, and the way that it's customary to eat the food by a community at large has a certain brocha, and if you prepare the food in a different way, it has a completely different brocha, then that has an effect, that has a bearing of what's the normal thing. You know what I mean? In terms of so we go according to what is normal for people. So the Gemara says, listen, it doesn't mean it's not money. They're just following the same theme because the sages of Rav Chia's academy expounded a superfluous verse. And in other words, the Brisa didn't understand yad miyad to be a monetary payment because of its phraseology. It's because it's superfluous that it's saying it's money. In other words, it wasn't a necessary statement at all. So it says it's written regarding Zomamim, witnesses, conspiring witnesses, you shall do with him as he conspired to do to his brother. So now if it enters your mind that they receive an actual corporal punishment, corporal is like lashes or literally a machete taking off a hand for a hand, you don't need that extra verse hand for a hand. Why? Because if an assailant receives a reciprocal wounding, then Zomamim witnesses who testified about a personal assault would receive the exact self-same wounding pursuant to the verse, because it says, what you shall do to him as he conspired to do to his brother. So the phrase a hand for a hand is therefore necessary to teach that Zomamim witnesses can receive corporal punishment, because all you need, guys, is the verse to say, you shall do to him as he conspired to do to his brother. That's clear as day. You don't need this hand by hand. That's unnecessary. So that, in fact, because it's superfluous, is coming to teach you to pay money. Not that money is transferred hand for hand. So the Gemara asks, so what do we need the statement, the phrase for a foot? And the Gemara says, since it's written a hand for a hand, the Torah also wrote a foot for a foot, meaning it keeps to the phrasal consistency. Okay? So it seems to be that it's gearing towards money now. They're not conclusive proofs. Now, another proof for payment that the damage is monetary compensation as opposed to limb for limb. Abaya said it's derived from that which a sage of Chizkiah's academy said in a brisa. The Torah states an eye for an eye, a life for an eye, a life for a life, which implies but not a life and an eye for an eye. What does this basically mean? If we look at Shmot, Exodus chapter 21, verse 24, the Chumash implies that while the assailant must compensate for the eye that he injured, he should not lose his life in the process. Further, that a life be taken only in reciprocity for a life. So we're saying that there's a law in biblical or Chumash law is different to Babylonian or Roman law. So there was that law, les talionis, which means the law of the claw. So what would happen in the old days, if somebody took off your dad's eye and he couldn't work, you could smash his head open with a baseball bat and kill him. And then the Romans and Babylonians said this was getting out of hand. For minor infractions, the reciprocal penalty wouldn't be of equal measure. It would be vengeful. In other words, it would supersede the damage caused. It would be a little over the top, as you'd say in today's language. So therefore, the law, les talionis, means law of the claw. You cannot damage the assailant more than the assailant damaged you. Because in Roman and Babylonian culture, they took revenge with glee. So that was just to calm things down with the non-Jews, okay? So we're saying that that proves that if you took the eye of an assailant and the life of an assailant, the only thing that's taken is your life, because you've got Kim Labati Rabamine, or the rule that we only give the more stringent penalty when there's more than one. But a person doesn't lose their life for taking somebody's eye. So it says, okay, so if it enters your mind that the payment for blinding someone then is losing an actual eye, because we don't take a life for an eye, so therefore we take an eye for an eye. That's almost the impression. Sometimes a case would be found that an eye and a life were taken for an eye, where at the time when the court was blinding the assailant, his soul departed, he died. So this establishes that an eye for an eye refers to a monetary payment. So what it's saying is, what happens if the court takes out his eye and his body receives such a shock, his soul leaves his body? So now you've taken a life for an eye. And that can't be that we take a more extreme punishment than the damage caused. So therefore it proves there's monetary payment, because we don't know if the person will die as a result of the physical shock, the assailant, from losing his limb, just like he took the limb of a victim. Maybe he took the limb of a victim, but that victim is super strong and has got great recovery, whereas the assailant is quite a sickly individual. And then he could die as a result of the reciprocal wound. So this proves it's money. So the Gemara challenges that proof. It says, no, there's no difficulty, because we first assess the physical condition of the assailant. And if it's deemed medically that he's able to endure being blinded, we do it. And if we see medically his body's going to go into shock, we don't do it. And therefore, if we make an accurate medical assessment, diagnosis, and his soul dies nonetheless, it has absolutely nothing to do with the wound. It's almost coincidental, because something could happen. Let me give you a perfect analogy, and we could end off on. We've got about 2 minutes left. If somebody goes for surgery and the doctor says well enough to survive the surgery, and maybe something goes wrong in the surgery, there's a complication, too much anesthetic, or the body reacts badly, as long as he got medically correctly assessed, and there wasn't any negligence on the part of the doctors, these things can happen. It doesn't mean that the doctors are necessarily responsible, as long as they weren't negligent and they did an accurate assessment prior, that he could survive the operation and that the operation was necessary. Because how do we know this? That when somebody, when the court-appointed agent gives lashes, after the court doctor assumed that the assailant being lashed has the capacity to withstand the lashes, the agent who actually gave him those lashes should go to the city of refuge, but he's exempt, because he relied on the doctor for an assessment that that the guy would be okay. So he doesn't get punished, the court agent, for dispensing the lashes. So we can't prove here that the damage is monetary in case the victim dies from the reciprocal limb for limb, because as long as he's assessed healthy beforehand, then if his soul departs, it's not their fault. So therefore, we're not worried about excessive payment in return for a minor infraction. In other words, he's not losing his life because of an eye. It's because there were complications that were beyond the assessment of the court doctor. So the bottom line is, this can't prove as a necessary precaution we do money in return for a limb. So far we haven't come to any proper conclusion. Guys, we can end on this note. Was this a useful shiur?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you.
right. And listen, we didn't read it. We discussed it. I hope that's easier than reading it because it takes triple the amount of time.
Yeah.
No, it's very good.
All right, guys. Have a great evening. Arthur, are you there, buddy? All right. Please, you also attended. I know you got your family, mate. I know you're exhausted, but I appreciate your attendance. All right, guys. What time tomorrow? What time?
Anytime after